Please visit my Amazon author page and learn more on the topics of law, hypnotism, and self-improvement.
All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on sovereign citizens. This is going to be wild. You guys sent in some really interesting stuff, legal analyses, articles debunking myths, even a bit from Sovereign Shadows. That's a book by Joseph Sapp. Seems to be like the go-to source on this topic.
Yeah, you're right. Sapp really gets it. He doesn't just, tell us what they believe, but he goes deeper, gets into the why. And that's really key. Understanding their motives if we really want to, wrap our heads around how this movement works and how to really push back effectively.
Totally. So before we get into the weeds here, what's like the core belief? What makes a sovereign citizen a sovereign citizen?
Well, at the heart of it all, it's this thing called redemption theory. And basically, what these folks believe is that they can just declare themselves exempt from the legal system, like hitting the opt out button on laws they don't like.
Wait, opting out? Like, seriously, that sounds less like a sentence and more like, I don't even know.
Right. It's like they're rejecting that whole like social contract thing. We
Yeah.
all kind of agree to play by the rules. And that's why it's so concerning, right? Imagine if everybody could just pick and choose which laws they follow. It'd be utter chaos. Undermines the entire legal system, could lead to clashes with the police, and in some cases, it can actually turn violent.
Okay, I'm starting to see why Sapp called his book Sovereign Shadows.
Yeah.
This is some dark stuff, even if it starts with, kind of crazy beliefs. And speaking of crazy, let's talk about some of the specific myths that they cling to. I was looking at that article, debunking sovereign citizen myths.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff is truly out there, like that straw man argument.
Ah, yes. The infamous straw man. That's
Yeah.
a perfect example of how they take legal concepts and, just twist them to fit their narrative. They claim the government creates a separate legal entity for every citizen at birth, this straw man. And they say it's that entity, not the actual person that's bound by laws.
So they think like our birth certificates, they'd like create some evil twin the government controls. This is like straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Right. It's pretty wild. But the reality is there's no such thing. As Sack lays out very clearly, it's just a made-up concept.
All right, straw man busted. But what about this whole thing with the Uniform Commercial Code and admiralty law? They say that's like the key to escaping government control.
Another classic case of misinterpreting legal stuff. The UCC, it's all about business deals, buying and selling goods, contracts. It has nothing to do with, like, the Constitution. And admiralty law, that's for stuff that happens at sea, maritime issues. Neither one applies to how citizens and their government interact.
It's like they're just pulling random legal terms out of a hat and trying to make them fit, huh?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And here's the thing, it can be surprisingly effective. Most people aren't legal scholars, so at first glance, this stuff can sound kind of convincing.
It's a good reminder that a little knowledge can be dangerous, huh? Especially when it's twisted like this. All right, one more myth I got to ask about because it seems to be like their favorite, the idea that paying taxes is voluntary.
Ah, yes. The sovereign citizen's favorite argument. The IRS definitely doesn't agree, though. Taxes are a legal obligation, plain and simple, not paying. Well, that has some serious consequences.
It's almost like it's tempting to laugh, right? I've seen those videos, sovereign citizens arguing with cops over traffic tickets or refusing to show ID. It's kind of funny. But then I remember what Sapp said about the potential for violence, and it's like a reality check. This isn't just some harmless quirk.
Exactly. It's important to remember that. The wild claims might be easy to dismiss, but the underlying beliefs, that's where the real issue is. That deep distrust of the government, feeling powerless. A lot of people feel that way, especially these days. And that's what makes this movement so insidious. It feeds on very real anxieties.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in how absurd it is. But we got to understand why people are drawn to this kind of thinking in the first place.
Which brings us to the root causes. Why are people susceptible to this stuff? What vulnerabilities are they exploiting?
Right? Because it's got to be more than just like misreading legal documents.
Mm-hmm.
And, the research points to three main factors: distrust of the government, economic hardship, and then this desire for control. Those are pretty universal human experiences, aren't they?
They are. Let's take distrust of government first. Think about the political climate we're in. Polarization, scandals, the feeling that the system isn't working for regular people. It's understandable that people would become cynical, lose faith in institutions.
And when that distrust is there, a movement like this can come in, take advantage, and offer this flawed solution. Just reject the whole system.
Exactly. And then you've got economic hardship. When people are struggling financially, feeling trapped, it's really tempting to look for quick fixes, like escaping debt, not paying taxes. It's appealing.
It's almost like a twisted version of the American dream. Instead of working within the system, they think they can just opt out of the rules.
Right. And then there's the desire for control. We all feel that to some extent, but for some, it's amplified, especially when they feel powerless in other areas of their life. Sovereign citizens, they tap into that need, promise empowerment, even though it's based on, a really shaky foundation.
So you have these root causes that make these beliefs appealing, right?
Yeah.
But how do they put these beliefs into action? What are their tactics?
One of the most common and definitely the most frustrating for authorities is what Sapp calls paper terrorism.
Paper terrorism. Now that sounds kind of scary. What is that exactly?
Think mountains of paperwork, frivolous lawsuits, fake liens, just bogus legal documents filed with courts and government agencies. It's designed to overwhelm the system, harass officials, intimidate anyone who challenges them.
Wow. So it's not physical violence. It's like bureaucratic warfare?
Exactly. They're trying to weaponize the legal system itself, even though their claims are baseless. And unfortunately, it can be really effective. Courts get bogged down, resources get drained, and the people they target, they get put through a lot of stress.
I read about this case where a sovereign citizen actually filed a lien against a judge's property just because he didn't like a ruling. Talk about holding a grudge.
That's more common than you'd think, and that's just one tactic. They also use obstruction a lot. Refusing to cooperate with law enforcement, giving fake information, anything to make it as difficult and frustrating as possible.
So basically a recipe for a major headache for anyone who has to deal with them.
Right. And then we can't forget about the gurus, these self-proclaimed experts who spread the ideology. Through seminars, books, online forums.
Like the snake oil salesman of the legal world.
Perfect analogy. They prey on people's vulnerabilities, selling a fantasy of freedom and control, and often getting rich in the process.
Okay, so we've got the beliefs, the root causes, the tactics. It's a pretty concerning picture. But what can we do about it? Is there any way to fight back, to stop this from spreading?
There is, and this is where things get a bit more hopeful. It's not an easy fight, but there are steps we can take, especially at the community level.
Okay, I'm listening. What can we, as individuals and communities, do to push back against all this misinformation?
One of the most powerful tools is legal education. The more people understand the actual laws, how the system really works, the less susceptible they are to these made-up legal theories.
So knowledge is power, huh?
Exactly. We need to
Wow.
demystify the legal system, make it accessible, give people the tools to spot these bogus legal arguments.
Are there any resources or programs you recommend for people who want to learn more?
Absolutely. Organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League, they have tons of information on their websites. They track extremist groups, including sovereign citizens, and they offer educational materials to help people understand and counter their tactics.
Great. We'll be sure to include links to those in the show notes so folks can check it out if they want to learn more.
Another key element is community support. Strong social networks, they can act as a buffer against extremist ideologies. When people feel connected, supported, like they belong, they're less likely to seek out these fringe groups that offer a false sense of community.
That makes sense. So building stronger communities, encouraging open dialogue, and addressing the root causes of distrust and economic hardship, those are all part of the solution.
Exactly. It's about creating a society where people feel heard, valued, and empowered. That's the best way to counter the allure of extremism.
It sounds like we've covered a lot. From the origins of these beliefs, to their tactics, to the root causes, and even some potential solutions. It's been a fascinating, if kind of disturbing, journey so far.
It has. And it's crucial to remember that knowledge is our best defense against ideologies like this. The more we understand them, the better equipped we are to fight back and build a more resilient society.
Well said. That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, one more question. We talked about how sovereign citizens target, judges, law enforcement. But I'm wondering, who else is at risk? Are there certain groups they kind of zero in on?
Yeah, that's a really important point. And Sapp actually addresses that in Sovereign Shadows. He points out that they often go after vulnerable populations, people who are already feeling disillusioned, marginalized.
The people who are more likely to believe that, the system is rigged against them.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
they might target veterans, guys coming back from a war zone, struggling with PTSD. feeling lost, disconnected, and then someone comes along and offers them this sense of control, this power through these so-called legal loopholes. It's a dangerous combination.
Man, that's awful. Exploiting the people who served our country.
It is. And it's not just veterans. They also target people facing foreclosure, crushing debt, anyone who's struggling financially, feeling desperate. They're prime targets. That promise of escaping those burdens through sovereign citizen tactics, it can be really tempting.
It's just so messed up, taking people's real problems and using them to push their own agenda.
Exactly. They exploit those pain points, offering this false hope, this idea of empowerment, all through these, distorted legal theories.
It makes you wonder, do they even believe this stuff themselves? Or is it just a big con?
It's tough to say for sure. Some might genuinely believe in it. Others, they're probably more opportunistic, seeing it as a way to exploit people or maybe get out of legal trouble themselves.
Yeah, I guess it's probably a mix of both. But no matter what their motivation is, the impact on the people they target, that's real. And it's harmful.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to address not just the beliefs themselves, but also, the bigger picture, the societal conditions that make people vulnerable to this kind of thinking.
So it's not enough to just debunk the myths.
Mhm.
We have to tackle the root causes, the distrust, the economic hardship, the things that create the breeding ground for this movement.
You got it. It's about working towards a more just, equitable, transparent society, one where people feel like they have a stake in the system and they don't feel the need to just, opt out completely.
That's a pretty tall order, but yeah, I agree. It's a goal worth fighting for.
It is. And remember, this isn't just about protecting ourselves from sovereign citizen tactics. It's about protecting our communities, our institutions, the very foundations of our democracy.
Right. This goes way beyond some quirky legal theories. It's about what it means to live in a society governed by the rule of law.
Exactly. The stakes are high. If we let these anti-government ideologies take hold, it could have a ripple effect,
Right.
eroding trust, undermining our democracy.
That's a sobering thought, but I'm optimistic. If we understand the threat, if we're aware of their tactics, and if we work together to address these underlying issues, we can push back. We can protect the values that matter.
I agree. It's a challenge for sure, but it's not impossible. And, as Sapp says in Sovereign Shadows, knowledge is the best defense against misinformation. The more we know, the better prepared we are to counter these harmful ideologies and build a more resilient society.
Well said. That's a good reminder. Okay, so we've uncovered the beliefs, the tactics, the root causes, and even explored some solutions. But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to shift gears a little bit and ask, you mentioned that ripple effect thing before, how these anti-government feelings, this sovereign citizen stuff, could spread and impact other parts of society. That's kind of a scary thought.
It is something to think about. Could this be a symptom of something bigger, a broader trend? This distrust, not just in the government, but maybe the media, science, even education?
It feels like everyone's questioning everything these days. It's
Yeah.
hard to know what to believe anymore. And then you throw in the whole misinformation problem online. It's a recipe for disaster.
It's really interesting. You have people who are already, primed to distrust authority. And then they're hit with all these conspiracy theories, these alternative facts online. It can be really, really radicalizing.
Like a virus, right? Spreading through social media,
Yeah.
online forums, infecting people with these dangerous ideas.
That's a good way to put it. And it shows just how important it is to build up those defenses, a digital immune system, so to speak. We need to get better at critical thinking, learn how to separate fact from fiction, be more careful about what we consume online.
So it comes back to education again, right? Not just about the law like we talked about before, but media literacy, critical thinking skills, the tools we need to navigate this whole crazy information world.
Absolutely. It's about being a responsible digital citizen, being skeptical, questioning things, checking the facts before you believe something.
It's a call to action for all of us to be more aware, more critical, more engaged, not just in our communities, but online too. Those spaces where these ideas are, taking root.
Exactly. Taking back our agency, our ability to think critically and, to have real conversations even when we don't agree.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of sovereign citizens, I want to leave our listeners with this. Be more aware, be more critical, be more proactive when it comes to fighting misinformation, whether it's coming from sovereign citizens or anywhere else.
Couldn't agree more. The future of our democracy really could depend on it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Deep Dive. We hope you found it insightful. And remember, knowledge is power. The best way to fight the darkness is to shine a light on it.
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged, everyone. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Into some other fascinating topic that's shaping our world.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of our Notebook Deep Dive podcast. Please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share what you have learned with others.